At my wife's 40th birthday, in front of 50 of our closest friends, I clicked a button and watched her perfect life collapse on the big screen. The truth poured out in photos, audio, and numbers, every secret exposed in real time. It wasn't rage that drove me, it was precision. A carefully planned demolition of a marriage built on lies. But my story doesn't begin with that night of champagne and betrayal. It began 3 months earlier, on an ordinary Tuesday, with the scent of vanilla, the crash of a coffee cup, and a single overheard sentence that set my entire world on fire. The silence inside felt staged, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to discover something I was never meant to hear. It was a day that should have been filled with the distant sounds of landscaping crews or the mail truck's familiar rumble. Instead, a thick, expectant silence greeted me as I pulled my car into the garage. I was home 4 hours early. A major meeting with a developer in Boulder had been postponed at the last minute due to a permitting issue, and I'd decided against lingering downtown. On the way back, I'd made a detour, a 20-minute drive out of my way to that one specific coffee shop in Lehigh, the only place Chloe swore could get her vanilla bean latte just right. It was a small gesture, an unplanned peace offering for the distance that had quietly grown between us over 15 years of marriage. A distance I had, until that moment, attributed to the simple erosion of time and the demands of work and children. 15 years. We'd met in college, a whirlwind romance built on late-night study sessions and shared dreams of a life far grander than our humble beginnings. I remembered our tiny first apartment, the one with the rattling pipes and the window that looked out onto a brick wall. We didn't have money, but we had each other. We'd lie on a mattress on the floor, planning the business I would build, the family we would have. "You and me against the world, Liam," she used to whisper. I believed it. I built my entire world on the foundation of that promise. I walked in through the mudroom, balancing the warm cup, aiming for a surprise. I wanted to see her face light up without having to ask for it, a glimpse of the woman I'd fallen in love with. I heard her voice then, drifting from the sunroom, punctuated by light, carefree laughter. She was on the phone, likely with her sister. I smiled, slowing my steps to not break the spell. That's when the words, sharp and clear, sliced through the air and pinned me to the floor. "He actually thinks they're his. Can you imagine? 15 years, and he still has no idea. Mark and I say it all the time, he's the perfect idiot." The words landed in my chest like a gunshot, impossible to unhear. My mind went blank. The image that flashed behind my eyes wasn't one of anger, but of the day our son, Noah, was born. I remembered holding him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, looking at Chloe, her face tired but luminous, and realizing that the brightest moment of my life had twisted itself into the cruelest joke, a memory once sacred, now corrupted forever. I had thought in that moment, this is it. This is the meaning of everything. My hand, suddenly disconnected from my brain, went slack. The latte tipped, spilling scalding liquid over my wrist, but the burn was a distant, unimportant sensation. The cup hit the hardwood floor with a sharp crack, a sound that felt like it came from inside my own chest. "No, I don't feel bad," she continued, her voice dripping with a smugness I'd never heard before. "He was always so wrapped up in building that real estate empire of his. He never saw the signs. He was too busy being the provider, the rock. Besides, Noah and Sophie looked just enough like him to pass. And Mark, well, Mark has always been the one. Always." I backed away silently, every instinct screaming at me to storm in, to unleash a torrent of rage and heartbreak. But a colder, more methodical thought took over, chilling me to the bone. A messy confrontation would give her power. It would allow her to twist the narrative, to play the victim. No. I didn't want a scene. I wanted the truth, and I wanted justice. I retreated to the garage, cleaned up the spilled coffee and shattered porcelain, and ran my wrist under cold water, the red mark a faint echo of the inferno raging within. 10 minutes later, I walked back into the house, whistling softly, as if I'd just arrived. Her performance was flawless. "Liam! You're home early. She walked over and planted a kiss on my cheek, a gesture that now felt like a snake bite hidden behind lipstick. I felt the warmth of her lips on my skin and fought the urge to recoil. Meeting got pushed, I said, my voice a marvel of steadiness. Figured I'd beat the traffic. Where are the kids? Out with my mother. They'll be back before dinner, she chirped. I brought you that latte you love, I said, forcing a sheepish grin. But I tripped like an idiot in the garage and dropped it everywhere. She chuckled, a light, teasing sound. Oh, you clumsy man. I laughed with her. It was a hollow, alien sound, but it served its purpose. She didn't suspect a thing. She still saw the perfect idiot. But she was wrong. The game had changed. I was no longer a player. I was the one watching the board, and I would wait for the perfect moment to make my move. That night, my home office, once a sanctuary of focus and ambition, became a war room. The family photos lining the shelves seemed to mock me, us at the Grand Canyon, Sophie on my shoulders at a Broncos game, Noah with his first fish. Chloe's head rested on my shoulder in half of them, her smile a beautiful, venomous lie. I stared at them until the faces became unfamiliar, actors in a play I never knew I was a part of. My fingers moved with cold precision across the keyboard. I searched for private DNA testing services, finding a lab that promised absolute discretion and court-admissible results. I paid extra for a rush order and had the kit mailed to my friend Dave's house, a college buddy who lived across town and knew better than to ask questions. My next call was to a man named Arthur Vance, the private investigator I'd used for due diligence during a complex business acquisition years ago. Arthur was a former federal agent who looked like he hadn't smiled since 1998, the kind of man who could vanish into shadows and return with your secrets neatly catalogued. Arthur, it's Liam Heston, I said when he answered. Mr. Heston. It's been a while. I trust your business is thriving. His voice was gravelly, devoid of emotion. It is. I need your services again. This time, it's personal. I need complete, silent surveillance on my wife, Chloe Heston. I want to know where she goes, who she sees, how long she's there. I need photos, audio if possible. Discretion is paramount. Understood. He said, no judgment in his tone. I'll email you the retainer agreement. We can begin tomorrow. The next week was a masterclass in deception. I became the husband I hadn't been in years, attentive, complimentary, present. I brought home flowers. I booked a reservation at her favorite restaurant in Cherry Creek. I listened intently as she told me about her day, my mind cross-referencing her stories with the GPS tracker I'd placed under her car. She soaked it up, telling her friends over the phone how sweet and romantic I was being lately. She thought she was softening me up for a difficult conversation or perhaps a request for more freedom. In reality, every smile, every kiss, every fake laugh, each was a weapon, disarming her while I quietly built the trap beneath her feet. The DNA kit arrived on a Friday. That night, after Chloe was asleep, I crept into the kids' rooms. The familiar scent of them, that mix of clean laundry and childhood, was a physical pain. This was the hardest part. As I gently collected a few strands of hair from Sophie's brush, my hands trembled. A wave of guilt washed over me. What was I doing? But then I remembered Chloe's laughter, her casual dismissal of my entire life, and the guilt was replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I sealed the envelopes as instructed and mailed the package the next morning. Arthur's first report arrived via a secure messaging app the following Tuesday. It was concise and brutal. Subject visited a residential apartment building at 1450 Fillmore Street on 3 separate occasions in the past week. Average stay, 2 hours, 15 minutes. The unit is registered to a Mark Peterson. The report included photos of Chloe's SUV in the parking garage and a distant shot of her entering the building. Mark Peterson. The name hit me like a physical blow. The same Mark I had mentored 12 years ago, when he was broke and sleeping on our couch. I'd given him his first big contract, co-signed a loan for his equipment, and treated him like a brother. Help him, Liam, Chloe had insisted back then. He's practically family. I now understood the chilling accuracy of that statement. The email with the DNA results arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The subject line was nondescript. Your results. My office felt airless. My hands were cold as I clicked it open. The words leaped off the screen, stark and absolute. Probability of paternity 0%. For both children. The world tilted, the spreadsheet on my other monitor blurring into a meaningless grid. 15 years of fatherhood, of bedtime stories and scraped knees, of teaching Noah how to throw a football and Sophie how to ride her bike, all of it dissolved into a biological fiction. I sat there, hollowed out and broken, for what felt like hours. But as the initial shock subsided, a new feeling began to crystallize from the wreckage. It wasn't just grief. It was rage, cold and clear as glass. I closed my laptop, walked to the private bathroom in my office, and looked at my reflection. My story wasn't going to end with me as the perfect idiot. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. The next day, I brought in a forensic accountant under the guise of an annual audit. I directed him to scrutinize every transaction involving Mark Peterson's construction company. It didn't take long to find the rot. Over the past 3 years, they had been siphoning funds through a sophisticated scheme of padded invoices, phantom supply orders, and kickbacks from subcontractors. They'd set up a shell corporation, registered to A.P.O. Box, which received monthly consulting fees from my firm. Several of the authorizing signatures on the payment requests were Chloe's, signed with power of attorney while I was on business trips overseas. They weren't just building a life together, they were funding it with my life's work. Armed with irrefutable proof of infidelity and financial fraud, I met with the most ruthless asset protection attorney in Denver, a woman named Isabella Rossi. She was sharp, impeccably dressed, and had a reputation for taking no prisoners. I laid out the entire story, including the DNA results and the financial records. She listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Mr. Heston, she said, her voice crisp, your wife and her lover are not just cheating, they are committing felony fraud. This isn't just a divorce, it's a criminal matter. Our first priority is to insulate your assets. Completely. Over the next few weeks, we worked with surgical precision. I established a new, irrevocable trust in my mother's name. Piece by piece, I began transferring everything into it, the rental properties, the stock portfolio, our vacation home in Aspen. The legal paperwork was complex, backdated to a corporate restructuring I had initiated 2 years prior, making the transfers appear as a long-planned business decision, not a reaction to a marital crisis. Signing those papers felt like methodically dismantling the life I had built, but Isabella was right. I wasn't losing it, I was saving it from them. To keep Chloe blissfully unaware, I amplified my performance as the repentant, doting husband. I bought her a diamond bracelet she'd been admiring. I told her I was thinking of stepping back from the company to spend more time with the family. She consumed my performance with voracious delight. Every feigned moment of my weakness fueled her arrogance, giving me another day to secure another asset. One evening, my son Noah came to my office looking troubled. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course, buddy. What's up? He shifted his weight, avoiding my eyes. Mom said that if you two ever split up, we'd probably go live with Uncle Mark. Is that true? My blood ran cold. She was already planting seeds in my children's minds, preparing them for the new world order she was engineering. I pulled him into a hug, my arms tight around him, hiding the tremor of rage that shot through me. Don't you worry about that, I said, my voice softer than I felt. That's not going to happen. That was the moment my objective shifted from mere separation to absolute scorched earth defense. The final piece of the puzzle was the upcoming neighborhood barbecue. I knew Mark would be there. When he saw me, he strode over, a wide, confident grin on his face. Liam, my man! Good to see you! He pulled me into a hug, clapping me on the back. I hugged him back, holding the embrace for a moment too long, imagining something entirely different. I handed him a beer and we talked about old times, Chloe laughing by his side. They looked at each other with subtle, knowing glances, so sure of their secret. And I laughed with them, a man watching a movie only he knew the ending to. The day of reckoning was no longer a vague possibility. It was scheduled. And the invitation was already in the mail. The final weeks leading up to Chloe's 40th birthday were a surreal exercise in restraint. I moved through our shared life like a ghost, every interaction a calculated move in a game she didn't know we were playing. She was consumed with party planning, a lavish, catered affair at our home for 50 of their closest friends. It was to be a celebration of her, of the perfect life she had so masterfully curated. She had no idea I was planning a celebration of the truth. I just want it to be a night to remember, she told me, sipping wine on our patio as she finalized the guest list. Oh, it will be, I replied, my smile unwavering. I guarantee no one will ever forget it. I leaned into her fantasy completely. I took her shopping for a birthday dress. I helped her select the caterer. I even suggested we invite certain people, her condescending boss, her gossipy cousin Jenna, and of course, Mark and his wife, Sarah. I wanted a full audience for the final act. I wanted witnesses to her downfall. I hired a tech consultant who owed me a favor. He set up a seamless system, linking the large television over the fireplace to a secure file on my laptop. With a single click from a small remote in my pocket, a pre-programmed presentation would begin. I tested it late one night in my office, watching the montage I had created, time-stamped photos of Chloe and Mark, audio clips from the PI's recordings, and scans of the fraudulent bank statements. It ended with a full-screen image of the DNA test results. Watching it alone, the pain was still sharp, but now it was a tool, honed and ready. The morning of the party, Chloe was radiant with excitement. Tonight is going to be so perfect, she hummed, wrapping her arms around me as I drank my coffee. Unforgettable, I corrected her gently, kissing the top of her head. The house filled with music and laughter that evening. Chloe, stunning in a silver dress, moved through the crowd like royalty. Mark arrived, oozing his usual charm, and I greeted him with a warm handshake. I even made a point to speak with his wife, Sarah, a kind, unassuming woman who had no idea her world was about to be shattered as well. You're lucky to have him, I said to her, raising my glass. He's a real go-getter. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. As the night wore on, guests drank champagne and offered toasts. Finally, Chloe's cousin Jenna clinked her glass. Speech! Let's hear from the husband. Chloe beamed at me, her eyes sparkling. Yes, Liam. Tell everyone how much you adore me. I walked to the front of the room, my glass raised. My hands were steady. My voice was calm, calmer than any man should be when about to burn his entire marriage to the ground. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my incredible wife, Chloe, I began, smiling directly at her. 15 years of marriage is a remarkable journey. It teaches you about love, about partnership, and it teaches you about truth. And this year, I learned a truth so profound, I felt I had to share it with all the people who think they know us so well. A nervous titter went through the room. Chloe's smile faltered. With my thumb, I pressed a button on the remote in my pocket. The television flickered to life. The first image was a high-resolution photo of Chloe and Mark kissing passionately in his apartment's parking garage. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Someone dropped a glass. Chloe's face went white. Her boss stared, mouth agape. Before she could speak, the next slide appeared, bank statements, with transactions to Mark's shell company highlighted in red. Then came the audio. Her voice, clear and smug, filled the silent room. He's the perfect idiot. By the time he figures it out, I'll be gone with half of everything. Mark froze by the bar, his face a mask of disbelief. His wife, Sarah, let out a small, choked sound. Chloe looked wildly around the room, her eyes pleading. Liam, turn this off. This is sick. But I let it play. I let them all hear her describe how she'd manipulated me for years. And then, for the finale, the DNA results appeared on the screen in large, bold letters: probability of paternity, 0%. I let the image burn into the silence for a long moment before clicking it off. I looked directly at Chloe. Her knees gave out like the strings had been cut from a puppet, and she stumbled against the table for support. You monster!" she hissed, her voice a ragged whisper. "You ruined everything." I took a step closer. "No, Chloe," I said, my voice level and cold for all to hear. "You ruined everything." The party dissolved in a horrified rush. Guests fled toward the door, muttering apologies, unable to look at either of us. Her cousin Jenna paused by the door, looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect, and simply nodded before leaving. When the last person was gone, the silence that remained was heavy and suffocating. I looked at Chloe one final time and said, "I just finally turned on the lights." "You think this makes you a man?" she shrieked, her composure finally shattering. "You'll pay for this. I'll take you for every last cent." "Take what?" I asked calmly. "The house? It's in my mother's name. The investments? They're in a trust you can't touch. Our vacation home? It was sold last month." I walked to the coffee table and set down a manila folder. "You were so busy planning your exit strategy, you never noticed I was executing mine. You'll be served with these divorce papers in the morning. Adultery, fraud, it's all in there. You'll walk away with exactly what you brought into this marriage. Nothing." Her face, stripped of its beauty and confidence, crumpled. That night I slept in the guest room. For the first time in months, I didn't lie awake listening for lies in the dark. I slept soundly, surrounded by the profound, cleansing silence of the truth. The next morning, I was up before the kids. I made them pancakes, just like any other Sunday. When Chloe finally came downstairs, her eyes red and swollen, the children were at the table, oblivious. She opened her mouth to speak, but I gave her a look, a silent, clear warning: not in front of them. Ever. She closed her mouth and walked away. My revenge on her was complete, but my protection of my children had just begun. A month later, after she had moved out and the legal proceedings were well underway, a handwritten letter arrived at my office. It was from Chloe. It was full of regret, excuses, and desperation. She wrote that Mark had turned on her, that his wife had left him, and that he was facing federal fraud charges. She wrote that her family had cut her off, that she was alone. Then came the final, desperate gambit. "I'm pregnant, Liam. And this time, it's yours." I leaned back in my chair and stared out the window at the Denver skyline. 1.5 years ago, after long conversations with my doctor about a health scare, I had quietly undergone a vasectomy. I had never told her. I had still hoped, foolishly, that we could fix things, and I didn't want to close that door forever. She was playing one last card from a hand that had been empty for a very long time. I folded the letter and dropped it into the trash. I didn't need to respond. I had already begun the hard work of rebuilding. My conversations with the kids were gentle. I told them that sometimes adults make mistakes that mean they can't live together anymore, but that my love for them was unconditional and would never change. I would protect them from the fallout, and we would build a new, smaller, but more honest life together. Biology didn't make a father. Love, commitment, and showing up every single day did. That weekend, I took Noah and Sophie up to the mountains. As I watched them skip rocks across the clear, cold lake, a feeling I hadn't recognized in years settled over me. Revenge had burned hot, but peace was the only thing worth keeping. The circus was over, the tent was down, and for the first time in a long time, I was finally, completely free. And that was my story. In the end, I didn't just take revenge. I reclaimed my life, and I learned that sometimes the sweetest justice isn't revenge at all. It's walking away stronger than before. What do you think? Did Chloe get what she deserved, or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story of betrayal, karma, An ultimate payback. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next story.